The Odyssey is the story of Odysseus and his incredible journey home. But before we get there, let me tell you about Trojan War. The Trojan War lasted for 10 long years. Can you believe that? So, guess how it all began? Believe it or not, because of a wedding. Long, long ago, there lived a beautiful sea goddess named Thetis. But there was one frightening prophecy about her. The son of Thetis will become greater than his father. When the gods heard the prophecy, they became uneasy. What if one of us marries Thetis, and their son grows even stronger than we are? He might even take our places someday. To prevent that from happening, the gods decided that Thetis would marry not a god, but a human hero named Peleus. But Thetis didn't want to marry a human. So she tried everything to escape the marriage the gods had arranged. She transformed herself into water, into fire, into a lion, and even into a snake, doing everything she could to break free. Peleus never let go. No matter what she became, he refused to release her. Eventually, Thetis and Peleus were married, just as the gods had intended. Not long afterward, they had a son. The child would one day become the greatest warrior in all of Greece. His name was Achilles. Holding her newborn son close in her arms, Thetis couldn't stop thinking. My child is human, mortal, which means one day he will die. No, I won't let that happen. Determined to make her son immortal, Thetis carried the baby Achilles to the river Styx, the legendary river of the underworld. If his body touches these waters, no one will ever be able to harm him. But to lower a tiny baby into the river, she had to hold him somewhere. She grabbed him by his heel. Every part of Achilles' body was submerged in the waters of the river Styx, except for the heel Thetis was holding. So his entire body became invulnerable. No weapon could wound him except for one place, his heel. And that's where the famous expression comes from, Achilles' heel. It literally means the heel of Achilles, or simply a fatal weakness. But at the wedding of Thetis and Peleus, something happened that would change history forever. They invited every god to the wedding. Well, nearly every god on Mount Olympus, except for one. There was one goddess they didn't invite, Ares, the goddess of discord. Why do you think they left Ares out? Can you guess why she wasn't invited? What? They invited everyone except me? Furious Ares suddenly appeared at the wedding and tossed the golden apple into the crowd without saying a word. Written on the apple were the words, "To the fairest." The moment everyone saw it, immediately 3 goddesses stepped forward. It's mine. No, it's meant for me. Hera, queen of the gods. Athena, goddess of wisdom and war. And Aphrodite, goddess of love and beauty. None of the gods wanted to choose among them, so instead they picked the human prince to decide. His name was Paris, the Prince of Troy. Each goddess secretly offered Paris a reward. Hera promised him limitless power. Choose me, I'll make you the ruler of the greatest kingdom on earth. Athena offered wisdom and victory in battle. Choose me, and I'll give you wisdom beyond anyone else, and victory in every battle. Then Aphrodite smiled and quietly whispered, Choose me, and I'll give you the most beautiful woman in the entire world. So which goddess did Paris choose? Aphrodite, the most beautiful woman in the world, the one Aphrodite had promised, was Helen. But why Helen? Because Helen already had a husband, a married woman. Yeah, that was a huge problem. Her husband was Menelaus, the king of Sparta. Even so, Paris fell deeply in love with Helen, the queen of Sparta. Then Paris took her back with him to his homeland, Troy. Oh my God. When Menelaus found out what had happened, he was furious. He immediately asked his older brother, Agamemnon, for help. Together, they gathered the armies of Greece. Soon, thousands of soldiers boarded their ships and sailed toward Troy. And that was the beginning of the Trojan War. Now, let's go back to Achilles' mother, Thetis. Thetis already knew what fate awaited her son. She had heard another prophecy. This time, it was about Achilles. He had only two possible destinies. If he stayed away from the war, he would live a long, peaceful life, but eventually be forgotten. But if he fought in the Trojan War, he would die young, yet be remembered forever as the greatest hero in history. If you were his mother, which future would you choose? Achilles, do not go to war. Thetis desperately wanted to save her son. According to one version of the myth, she even hid her son away to keep him from joining the war. But someone eventually found the hidden Achilles. It was the hero of our story, Odysseus. Known for his cleverness, Odysseus relied on his intelligence more than his strength. In the end, Achilles joined the Trojan War. The moment he entered the battlefield, he proved to be an unstoppable warrior. The Trojan soldiers trembled at the very sight of him. It's Achilles! He's invincible! Our weapons can hurt him. Let's run! But one day, Achilles had a fierce argument with Agamemnon, the commander of the Greek army, the older brother of Menelaus. Achilles' pride had been wounded, so he refused to fight. Without Achilles, the Greek army began to lose ground. Seeing the Greek army struggle, Patroclus, Achilles' closest friend, couldn't stand by and do nothing any longer. So Patroclus did something incredible. He put on Achilles' armor. Wait, what? And rode into battle? No way! When the Trojans saw the famous armor, they panicked. Achilles has returned! But the warrior inside the armor wasn't Achilles at all. But Patroclus faced Hector, the greatest warrior and prince of Troy. In the end, Patroclus was killed by Hector. When Achilles heard the news, he couldn't believe it. Patroclus is dead? But the moment he saw his friend's dead body, his grief turned into overwhelming rage. Achilles put his armor back on and charged onto the battlefield. "Hector, I'm here to avenge Patroclus." The two greatest warriors finally faced each other before the walls of Troy. In the end, Achilles killed Hector, but his anger didn't end there. He tied Hector's body to his chariot and dragged it around the walls of Troy. Watching from the top of the walls of Troy, Hector's family and the people of Troy could only watch in sorrow. That night, an old man secretly entered the Greek camp. He was King Priam, the father of Hector, and the king of Troy. He knelt before Achilles, who had killed his son, Hector. "I have not come as a king. I come only as a father who has lost his son. Please, give me back my son's body." Looking at the grieving old father, Achilles thought of his own father, Peleus. "My father must be waiting for me too. But will I ever return home alive?" Little by little, Achilles' anger began to fade. He returned Hector's body to Priam. For that brief moment, they were no longer enemies. They were simply a father mourning his son, and a son longing for his father. Together, they wept. This scene reminds us that Achilles was more than an invincible warrior. He was also a deeply human hero, capable of grief, rage, and compassion. But even Achilles, who seemed invincible, could not escape his fate. Eventually, his final moment arrived during the Trojan War. Remember Paris, the prince who brought Helen to Troy? He was also Hector's younger brother, determined to avenge Hector. Paris found Achilles' only weakness. He fired an arrow, and it stuck Achilles in the heel, the only part of his body that had never touched the waters of the river Styx. And so, the greatest warrior in Greece, Achilles, fell, just as the fate that Thetis had always feared. Achilles did not live a long life, but even thousands of years later, his name is still remembered today. He died young, but won eternal glory, just as the prophecy had foretold. But even after Achilles died, the Trojan War wasn't over. Greece and Troy had been fighting for nearly 10 years. The walls of Troy were too strong. No army could break through them by force. So, this time, Odysseus came up with a plan. Not with strength, but with strategy. As he stared at the walls of Troy, he began to think. No matter how many times we attack, we'll never break through those walls. So, instead of breaking them down, a smile crossed his face. Why don't we make the Trojans invite us inside themselves? That idea became a giant wooden horse, the Trojan Horse. Hidden inside were the Greeks' best soldiers, Then the rest of the Greek army pretended to sail away, leaving the giant horse behind, as if it were a gift. When the Trojans saw that the Greek army had disappeared, they believed they had finally won. They pulled the giant wooden horse inside the gates of Troy, believing it was a gift, celebrating their victory. That night, the people of Troy sang, danced, feasted late into the night. But after darkness fell, quiet. Now, let's move. Odysseus and the Greek soldiers climbed out of the wooden horse one by one. They quietly made their way to the gates of Troy and threw them open. The Greek army, which had secretly returned by sea, charged through the open gates. Troy finally fell. After 10 long years, the Trojan War was finally over. The Greeks had won, not with the strength, but with the brilliant strategy of Odysseus. The Greek heroes who survived the war sailed home. Odysseus must have thought, finally, I'm going home. I'll see my wife and my son again. Back in Ithaca, his beloved wife Penelope had been faithfully waiting for her husband's return, and their son Telemachus had grown up waiting for a father he barely knew. But Odysseus had no idea that an even greater adventure than the Trojan War was waiting for him on the journey home. Cyclops, Greek Cyclops, the one-eyed giant who devoured human beings. Circe, Greek Kirke, the powerful witch who turned people into animals. Sirens, Greek Sirenes, whose beautiful songs lured sailors to their deaths. And Poseidon, Greek Poseidon, the god of the sea who hated Odysseus and did everything he could to keep him from returning home. I just want to go home to my family. All he wanted was to return home. The voyage home should have taken only a few weeks. Instead, it lasted 10 years. No wonder Odysseus looks exhausted in the movie. 10 years at Trojan War, another 10 years trying to get home. For 20 years, Odysseus couldn't see his family. By then, his little boy must have been all grown up. 20 years. Imagine being away from your family that long. Remember these two heroes, and the movie will make much more sense. Achilles, Greek Achilles, the greatest warrior, a hero who represents strength, honor, and rage. He chose a short life filled with eternal glory. Odysseus, Greek Odysseus, the cleverest hero. He survives through wisdom, strategy, and endurance. More than anything, he wants to return home to his family. If the Iliad, Greek Ilias, is the story of Achilles' rage during the Trojan War, then the Odyssey, Greek Odyssea, is the story of Odysseus' long journey home after the Trojan War. We'll dive deeper into the Iliad another time. If you know this much before watching the movie, you'll find yourself thinking, so that's why this character acts that way. Everything starts to connect. And now the Odyssey begins. The story of a man who struggled for 10 long years to find his way home. A journey filled with storms, monsters, angry gods, temptations, and impossible choices. This isn't just the story of a hero. It's the story of perseverance, wisdom, and never giving up on the people you love. Can Odysseus survive and finally return to Ithaca, Greek Ithaca, where his wife and son are still waiting for him? Welcome to the Odyssey.